Hey guys, and welcome back to West Texas Bushcraft. The last video was making the official West Texas Bushcraft prison shank bush knife Mark II, the neck version, or however you want to carry this bad boy. So this video will be making a sheath for that, because this thing's been floating around sheathless, naked. It's got to have something, so we're going to make that. And since I have an anchor video of leatherworking that pretty well incorporates everything you need to know about how to put leather together, I'm going to show you how we're going to put a sheath together for this, and then you can go back and reference the other video for stitching and riveting or whatever we may wind up doing to get a decent sheath for this bad boy. So hang out and we'll get started. Okay. So I've selected my piece of leather. This is the same. This piece of leather is off the same height of my last leather project that you saw the video on. So I know this is a good piece. Of course, the same thing as like last time. You want to look for major flaws that's going to really hinder your project. This has no cuts in it. There's a little stain, little writing here, but this is the back side. Not a problem. No flaws on the front. It'd be cool if there were some tick bites or something on that that would give this thing a little character, but yeah, it doesn't have it, but I'm not worried about that. I can distress it if I want to. But I've already gone through here and cut this edge off, so that way I got a good straight edge to start with. Not like it matters, but I'm anal about that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep this and build a sheath that is going to fold over this knife and stitch along this side here. That's the kind of sheath I'm going to build. It's just going to be one that this thing slips into. Nothing's going to snap on this. It's going to be fairly simple. I want this to hang from my neck, so I know it's going to hang vertically. I don't really need to hold it into place because it's not going to be on my side where I'm going to have a tendency to snag the knife, pull it out, or it's going to go horizontal or something and fall out. I'm not worried about that in this case. And when I carry a neck knife, it typically goes underneath my shirt, so it's fairly secure that way. So let's get started with this. How I'm going to do this is this is going to kind of throw me a little bit of a loop here. Normally in a situation like this, if you have one with no finger guard, you just trace the whole side of the knife, flip it over and trace the other side. But this kind of gives me a little issue. If I do this, if I trace this and stitch that down, I'm not going to be able to get this in here. So I'm going to start from the tip of the knife, and I'm going to trace up to here to the halfway point of this. I'm going to mark up here where I want this to end, which should be right about here. And what the heck, let's go ahead and mark it down here so you get an idea of the length of this sheath. So at this point I have this marked, and for a point of reference I'm going to mark just right up here, and I'll show you why. Now I got that side. I'm going to roll it over easily, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to trace that end to the halfway point of my finger guard, and then I'm going to mark in relatively the same spot over here for a reference point. May as well do it back on this side as well. So I know that I want this to be about yay long. Now remember, this is mostly eyeballed. I do a lot of eyeball work. Not a problem. If you want to get technical and start measuring stuff out, awesome. Go right on ahead. But to give you an idea of how this is going to shape out, it's going to be basically half of this. So now I need a straight edge, because what I need to do is make sure that the end of this sheath, let me get this where you can see it. What I need to do is make sure that this knife will slip down the end of this sheath. So I'm eyeballing here. I got my point of reference right here, and it's basically the width of this So that's going to work out nicely. And here's my end point. So what I'm going to do is line up that point of reference here, and I'm going to take my straight edge and go from here and do the same thing on this side. So what I'm looking for here is basically the same distance between here and here and here and here, and then just trace that up to where I stopped. Now here I'm going to eyeball this again, make sure it's pretty square. There's always trimming and adjustments to be done when you're doing leather work. There we go. So basically there's my basic sheath pattern right there. This will fold over the knife. It'll take relatively this kind of shape when it's on there, and this will slip right down in here. Yeah, I'm going to have a little room up in here, but I'm not worried about that. That's not that big a deal. So now I want to make sure that this thing is large enough that once I stitch this, my knife fits. And remember, you can cut the edges off. So I'm going to take roughly probably about a 1/4 of an inch, and I'm using a different color marker here, and I'm going to just draw this along the edges. Up to the top of the sheath. Same thing on this side. To that line. And just for a reference point, I'm just going to draw that across. Now I have a little extra slack here. This could be my edge, but I know that's going to be a good snug fit right there. So I know I need to stitch somewhere in this area, and that's probably going to be along that line, because remember, I have to glue this down and then I'll have to stitch up in here. So there's going to be a nice little area here of 2 layers of leather for this to slide into. Now, since I know that I'm going to hang this for my knife, or for my neck, I'm going to need some sort of tag on here that I can fold over, rivet down, and have a loop so this can hang from. I can hook a carabiner to it, anything else. I can make this a belt knife, a neck knife, whatever, as long as I have some sort of loop here to hang that from. I could make this a horizontal lay, but it's awful long and it may get in the way, so I think I'm just going to blow that part off. This is a good little nail file my wife left out here, so I'm going to use this as a reference here. Now, where am I going to put this loop? This side or this side? It doesn't matter. It's going to be your personal preference, but it needs a loop of some sort. This is about the good enough width that I'd like for my loop to be, so I'm going to start it right here. I'm going to take it right along this line here and just trace it all the way to the edge of my leather on both sides. Now I have a good tag to loop over onto this thing. It's going to be a little nasty because I got lines on it, but it's all for demonstration purposes and I don't really care. Now it's time to cut this bad boy out. Do I cut on this purple line? Probably not a good idea, because I'm not really positive if there's going to be enough leather here for a tag to stitch this down. So what I'm going to do is about half of this width I'm going to start and cut out along the edge here. So that way I make sure I have enough leather to deal with. So we'll size it up after we cut it out. Now when I go to cut this out on this tag, I'm going to cut right along this line, so I'm going to come out just a bit and then cut right directly on this line and on this line here, because I know this is where this thing is going to end, and here and here. This is not necessarily where it's going to end here, so from here all the way around to here, I'm going to cut out side of this line just a bit. So my piece is cut out now. Now maybe you can see what I'm talking about a little bit when I say I'm going to cut outside the lines. Yeah, your kindergarten teacher used to get you in trouble. Nah. Okay, so our piece is cut out. Now maybe you can see a little bit more about what I was talking about here, about cutting outside this line. Yeah, your kindergarten teacher used to get on to you if you colored outside the lines, but here this is okay. I cut outside the line here. That gives me room for adjustment. I know my sheath is going to end on this side, so I cut that right on the line. Same thing with my tag for my loop. Now you're thinking, man, how's that going to work out? Well, let me just show you. I'm going to size my knife up to this. Of course, I'm laying it right on the line where I traced it. I'm going to just simply fold this thing over. And you can see how much room I have in here to stitch. I got plenty of room. So this actually is going to be darn near a perfect fit. So I'll hold that down, flip that tag over, there's my loop. Look at that. Magnificent. That is pretty well my sheath, and I have enough of my knife here that I can grab the tab and just pull that thing right out. Amazing. So it's time to put this thing together. Now, is the first thing I do going to be to fold this over, glue it down, and get it ready for stitching? No, it is not. You want to lay this over on the back. You want to fold your tag over and glue and rivet or stitch that down, whichever way you want to do it, because if you wait, if you forget that step and you get this glued and stitched, my goodness gracious, are you going to hate yourself later. It is not going to be fun for you. Make sure you get that. So I'm going to do exactly that. Fold that over. I'm going to dress this edge out a little bit. I'm going to fold it over, glue it down, rivet it into place. That is a great little loop. I can slip my pinky in there, so I know I should be able to get a decent sized carabiner in there, or any kind of cordage I want to hang that around my neck. So we're going to do that. If you need to know how to pop a rivet in one of these, check out my other basic leatherworking video. Okay, so I got these two little rivets popped on here, just like you see in the last video. They're there. It's glued down, riveted on there. Plus, you see this other rivet here is this cool little buffalo nickel. Yeah, a little buffalo nickel concho. That'll look pretty cool once that's folded over and stitched down. So it makes a nice little touch to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and put some glue in this line within here, and then glue this edge down and get it ready for stitching. But I have one little thing I got to add to it before I stitch. So I'll show you that once I get this glued, because I need this glued first. Okay, so we're glued down here all the way around. I sized it, slipped the knife in there. It's going to work great. I'll have to moisten this a little bit afterwards and then slip that knife in there, and it'll give it a good shape in there for it to slide on. So now for the little touch, I'm going to take this little piece of latigo strap, and this is going to be for the fire steel. I want the fire steel to ride up here on the back side of this rather than on the inside. I'll look at how that's done. It ain't going to work. It's going to work better up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my latigo and I'm going to run it right along the edge here. Now I had to clean this edge up and get this good and flush so I can mark for my stitches here in a bit. But what I want to do is I want to put my fire steel right here, And I want to loop this around. Let's put this a little higher. I think that'll work better. And that gives me a good contrasting color. So now that way this will slide freely in and out. And of course the shock cord, you just pull it across and flip it over there, and that's going to hold that nice and secure. So I'm going to mark that where I want to cut my latigo. I'm going to make sure it's nice and even there. I'm going to mark that right along the edge there. There. That's just barely marking. Yeah, there we go. Got a decent little mark. You probably won't be able to see it, but I can see it. Actually, just kind of made a bit of a mess. And then just take a chisel, line it up on my line, pop, cut. Done. So I'll come back over here and I'll line it up basically where I'm going to want it here. I'm going to mark that little spot, and I'm going to glue that to it as well. So that way when I mark my stitches, I can stitch this through, and it's on there pretty darn good. Now we're all stitched up. I even went and beveled the edge just a little bit so that way it'll dress out. Now it's time. I'm going to just take a moist paper towel and just kind of wet this down a little bit here. Not too much, about as much as I did on the previous video where I showed you how to mark where your stitches are going to go. Just enough to soften this just a bit. Leather is nature's Kydex. So now I have this moistened up. Now I'm going to take my knife and I am going to slide it down in there. And as you can see, it is shaping that leather nicely. Get it all the way down. And at this point too, you can use other things to stuff in here to get your shape exactly how you want it. I'm going to stuff this with a couple of crossbow bolts. Kind of wedge those in there. You can use whatever. So you want to use that. And then let that dry. And it should pretty well retain the shape I'm looking for here. Oh man, I marked it with my fingernail. That's going to be permanent now. Might as well do it on the back side too. Give it a little burnished edge, I guess. Gives it that little distressed look, I reckon. There we go. So I'll let that dry a bit until it's back to close to its original color. Okay, so this is dried out enough to have a look at it and see what we got here. Nice and snug. Now as I work that through there, in and out, that'll loosen up just a bit, so that'll be good. Now as I've been sitting here working on this thing, I was thinking, well, I'll just leave it natural because I usually like the natural look. Well, I think this one's begging to have a little bit darkened. So I'm going to show you how to stain leather. This is the stuff I like to use. It's the Fibings or Fibings, however you want to say that, acrylic antique leather stain. I don't like to dye leather because the dye, it seeps in there, but it continues to slough color off after you've done that, and man, it just makes a mess. And if I'm going to tuck this into my shirt, I'm going to wind up with that color on my chest, and I don't want that. So I'm going to use stain instead. This is the exact same stain I used on Lost Bastardo. Now, you saw the color, how it came out, nice antique look. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. If you really want to get a good deep rich color, then you work little small areas. If you want to just darken it just a little bit, then you cover the whole thing as quick as you can and get it off of there as quick as you can. So less talk, let me show you how it's done. I'll load up, I got a rag here. This is actually just a piece of sock. I'm going to start on the back side here, and I'm just going to give it a good wipe down and cover some area with it. Try to get it under that flap as much as possible. Some of that stuff you probably won't be able to see, but that's okay, you get the idea. There we go. It's probably going to mess up my shape a little bit, but that's okay. Working the knife in and out of there is going to work okay. Now I can run this real heavy along the edge, and it'll burnish out the edge, which is pretty cool. Let's get this board off of here. So, knowing I was going to stain this, I made sure that on the edge here I trimmed off as much of that leather that had glue poking out of it as much as possible, because of course the stain won't penetrate that, so it winds up making a bit of a mess, and then you'll have some light spots, and I can see I didn't get it completely cleaned off of here on this sheath, so I'm going to have some spots up there, but that's, you know, it's okay. It really doesn't matter a whole lot. Now the thing I like about this stain too is these raw backs. When you get that stuff on it and then you rub it out real good, it burnishes that edge and smooths it down a little bit, and smooths this stuff down a little bit. So now I have pretty well what I like on here. And that's going to look great. So now I'm going to go wet down this piece, get a nice little, get a little moisture in that, and then come back and rub this stuff off, and it should clean up nicely here. Okay, so now I have this moistened. I wringed as much water out of this as I could, because you don't want this drippy. Now I'm just going to come back and wipe at it a little bit. And the good thing about that is too, is if you get scratches in your leather as you're working on it, that's cool, because what it'll do is it'll darken those scratches and give you that really cool antique look, like this has been used for ages. I like that look. I mean, if you're going to do leather, might as well have it nice and rustic looking. So there we go. I've got my excess pretty well off of here now. Maybe I'll dip my finger in that deal and just kind of wipe it on the inside of this lip a little bit. There. Now we have a nice little stain, and as that dries we can buff it out. Now I'm going to take my original that I had used here with the stain on it, and I'm going to come back and just give it one little quick wipe, since it's still has a little bit of that on there, just to give it a second coat. You can do this as many times as you want, but I want to kind of hit the high spots with it, so that way it adds a little bit extra, darkens it up just a bit, and you can keep going over this until you get the color that you desire out of it. There we go. That's good. And then I'm going to come back with just a dry cloth of some sort. This is sock, and I'm just going to give it a good buff. Now the more you put on this, the shinier it'll be when you give it a good buff. Hit my edges. There you go, and now you can see that has a little bit of a sheen to it. So I'm going to drop my knife back down in there a couple more times, run that knife in and out, get that leather a good shape. Since this has some moisture in it, this is going to have a little bit of dry time. And as you can see here, my blade, I've got plenty of room to work with here. Here's my blade, that's where it comes up to. So I'm not worried about that blade at all ever cutting any of my stitches here. So alright, we'll run that in and out a little bit more, get some shape. We'll let that dry, completely dry out, and then we should be done. Alrighty, bushcrafters, so we're done. It's finished, it's made. A little fire steel right up here on top. Just flip that off of there. Good to go. Good to go. Oiled up the knife nicely. Stuck it in the sheath. It's going to slough a little bit of leather off, but after a while that'll go away. That's all the fuzzy stuff from the inside of that. So now I oiled up the knife real heavy, so that way when I put it in here, it oils this as well. So that way my knife gets oiled just about every time I put it in there. Got a decent little loop up here on the back. It's not big enough to really put it on my belt, but I don't really want this on my belt. If you make your own and you want yours to go on your belt, make sure you make that tag a little bit longer so that way you can get it there. This is so light, this doesn't weigh squat, so this will work perfect around my neck, just like so. So that's what I want to do with it, is I want to hang this on my neck. If I do want to hang it from my belt, I think I'd rather just put a carabiner on here so I can just clip it to my belt loop and go on about my business, because there's a lot of times I don't really like to wear a belt, but it's good to have something handy here like that. So yeah, whatever your preference is, but there you go. There is the official West Texas Bushcraft Prison Shank Bush Knife Mark II Neck Knife Edition with sheath and fire steel. Pretty cool little setup. I hope that was informative. I hope that helped you learn something, and also I hope that you guys make some stuff and let me know what you make, because I want to see it. So man, any kind of good video response to that would be awesome. I'd love to see it. If you have some tips on leatherworking that you think would make this go a little bit smoother, which that went pretty well. I got this whole thing done in roughly about an hour, so that's not too bad. If you have any ideas how to make this stuff go a little quicker, let me know. So until then, you guys go get dirty, have fun, be safe, don't cut yourself. And as always, I thank you guys for watching, and I really appreciate your support. I'll catch you guys later.